Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at an upcoming auction that's taking place in Mississippi. There's a number of different ones that are happening on April 6th that are kind of exciting. But before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about Mississippi and how Mississippi tax auctions work.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to be looking at if it's Amet County, if I'm saying that correctly here, or not, but there are a number of different counties there in Mississippi that are doing their sales.
Now,
So how exactly does Mississippi handle property tax collection? Well, they're officially a tax lien state, so they basically issue liens every year, that are delinquent past a certain point, and so that's generally going to be done here. And a sale is going to be conducted. They use premium bidding method to sell the liens off, but the idea being that they're selling off those liens here, and the rate of return that you can earn, the maximum rate of return in Mississippi is 18% annually, or about 1.5% per month. So they actually have a pretty healthy rate of return. I mean, Mississippi's rate of return is as high as Florida, and Florida, draws a lot of investors out for that interest rate return, which is ultimately what you're going to earn, or most likely to earn, on most liens. And so, yeah, it's a great rate of return, but they can also use that rate of return as the as a bidding method, or they can have premium bidding there, where they will have use a surplus. So basically, they'll bid up the price on the property.
yeah, now the tax collector is going to be the person that's responsible, and their auctions generally occur on the first Monday in April or the last Monday in August. And like Shade mentioned, they use a premium bid method. Now, one thing to remember about the premium bid method in this case is the overbid does not earn interest. So let's say that you went ahead and purchased a $1,000 lien and you bought it for $1,100. That additional $100 isn't going to be earning that 18% return. And so that's the way they're able to kind of determine how much you're going to be winning, will determine how much your premium bid is. So that's something to kind of remember as you're bidding on these type of auctions, is instead of bidding down the interest rate, you're going to be bidding up the premium. So if it starts at $1,000 and you bid 110 and somebody bids 120, 1,020, and you win it for $1,050, that $50 you wouldn't be earning the interest rate on. Now, one thing about Mississippi as well is they don't offer over-the-counter tax liens. What the county does is they hold those liens, and after a 2-year period, they send those liens over to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State actually forecloses on the property and offers them through the state to be purchased, sometimes at auctions, even though they haven't had their auctions for the last couple of years, or you can purchase them through an offer process over the counter.
Yeah, it's part of their tax forfeited lands division, that they have for the Secretary of State. And what's nice about that, at least the one benefit, is that it's a statewide office that handles all of the foreclosures there for property taxes for the whole state. And so it's a little bit like some other states, like Arkansas. They have a central office holder that manages everything but the sale. So it's kind of like one website you can go to learn about all of the opportunities there in the state. In the Secretary of State's website for tax forfeited lands is kind of like that for liens that have been foreclosed on in Mississippi, not for the actual lien auctions though, just for the foreclosed on land that is left over.
Yeah, definitely. So there's tax deed opportunities there, but now that Mississippi has moved over some of their tax liens online, this is really giving us an opportunity to be able to purchase tax liens within this state. Now, I understand the premium bid method's a little bit different than bidding down the interest rate, and you kind of got to calculate what your interest is actually going to be. So instead of earning 18%, maybe you're earning 16% or 15% on it, depending what your premium bid is. I think this could be a really great state where we could get higher interest rate returns than we could in a state like Florida, especially because they're new to online auctions. And as we were looking through some of these different counties, it seems like to us that the opening bid amount is just a small fraction of what some of these properties are valued.
Yeah, so we can see in Mississippi, we've got a number of different sales that they're doing here, but we're going to be looking at this this Amet sale here. And it is a pretty large sale. I mean, if we're looking at it, let's just scroll down here, because it could be as many as 50 properties per page. And I think there's 20 pages of properties here. Yeah, there's 20 pages of properties. So it is a lot of properties. I mean, that could be upwards of nearly 1,000 properties. Is that right? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah,
Uh,
not a bad sized list, and some pretty good opportunity. Alabama's moving online, Mississippi is moving online, and there's a number of different states that are moving their tax lien online auctions or their auctions online. And so, if we can get a better interest rate in an auction like Mississippi, it could be worth looking at versus getting a lower interest in maybe Arizona or maybe Florida or one of these other states. The return is going to be the return. So if it's on a Mississippi home or a Florida home, if you're earning a better return in Mississippi and you're okay with the time period as far as the redemption period's the same, and you'll have a chance to own the property, where in a state like Florida, you're not going to have really a chance because it's going to be sent to the tax deed sale. So if it does go to the end of that 2 years, you'd have the chance to be able to actually acquire it.
Now one thing that's interesting about this sale is that there is a lot of quality property, in this auction. If we're looking, and you can tell, the party that is involved here, they've got the prior owner's name listed here, and then you can see the amounts. And so the amounts range from, I mean, some of these are under $100 up to thousands of dollars. They can be. But what's interesting is the quality that you get for the amount. All right. So for example, what I mean by that is you can see there's like 3 lots here under this Perkins Roy here. If we click on this one right here, I think it was for $1,667. And let me click on this. And what we can see is it's a homestead on 10 acres of property here, that we're looking at. And we can see that it's valued at about $187,000, right? Not too bad. And going off of the numbers here, I mean, if we're just going off of what they say here, not necessarily checking our own, it's available for about, at least the lien represents less than 1% of the property's value, which whenever we have liens at that amount, it looks pretty good in terms of the numbers, because the lien represents such a small percentage of value that it tends to be very secure. Now, if we also look at that other one that was right down below it for $906, so again, not very high, we can see that it's actually all the land that surrounds this property, probably another 40 or 50 acres or so of property here for that $900. And we can see that they estimate the value here at like 63. So, and the market may be a little bit higher than that, but we can see that it's not quite under that 1% with this property, at least in terms of just their raw numbers. But they vary just a little bit. But between these 2 properties here, I mean, you basically have 2 liens that you could pick up for about $2,700, $2,600, and they would represent, this $200,000 home plus, 50 acres of land, which it's almost guaranteed to be in excess of $300,000 or worth of value or more, for this property. And again, you're into it for less than 1% of value.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And this is the reason we said this could really be a good opportunity, where some of these counties are moving their auctions online. They don't have a 4-year redemption period. It's reasonable 2-year redemption period. You can receive the property after the end of the redemption period is over. And I was looking at a couple of the properties, just the very top. It was like a $97 lien on a good big piece of land.
Yeah, the cheap ones are like, that is one thing that is kind of interesting, is that the cheap liens are not always against junk properties. You'd be amazed at just how nice some of these are. And this is a $126 lien right here, and it's against a valuable property. I mean, it's $126, and the property, they value it at 8,400. It looks like it, I can't tell how many acres it is, but it is a number of acres here, and it has good value. In other words, again, it's those same numbers where it's a tiny percentage of value compared to what the property is actually worth. And that's a $126 lien. In some places, like for instance, in Florida, so a $126 lien is either a partial lien or it's going to be against a junk property. It's just not that case here, where we have all kinds of properties here, that don't necessarily cost a lot, but they can be, excellent properties.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I was just looking at number, oh, what is it? Number 157, but oh no, 164, sorry. But I mean, I haven't seen a property yet that doesn't look like it would be worth bidding on at the price. I've looked through, 50 of them, and I haven't seen one property, and I'm sure there is going to be ones that we wouldn't bid on, but everything has some type of value to it. I think the county assessed value on a lot of these is less than what the actual market value is, because I've looked at a couple of the homes and a couple of these different properties, and it seems like it could be anywhere between 30 to 50% higher than whatever the assessed value is.
Yeah, I'll bet it almost certainly is, which would only make these deals that much better. And something else that's interesting is there are a number of commercial properties in this list as well. There's probably there's a number of very nice residential homes as well. I mean, there's homes in here that are valued in excess of $500,000. That's just what we've seen here so far. I mean, this is a lumber yard, that's like 22 acres. And it also, there's the one right down below this. So this one is it's like $2,000 is the base, not $2,200. And I think the one right below it here is also the same thing, Green Tree Lumber here. And this one is like the building that's right down below it, and another 7 or 8 acres of property that you could go after. Right here. And they value it. You can see the building itself is valued at 200,000, and they kind of add the land on top of that here with the property, and you've got another 8 acres of property, and the values are probably higher on all of these compared to what the county estimates them at. In fact, there's a few of these that are very interesting. Let's see here.
As far as land, oh, what page are you on?
On page, which page do you want me? Do you want me to go to a certain page?
Oh no, I just thought you were still on page 1. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever.
Oh no. In fact, there's a lot of land in this cell. I was amazed. Half the properties I clicked on, seem to have acreage on them, and represent, some really nice properties. But what's interesting is we can look at a few of these, the ones here that are at higher amounts, and it's interesting on what they are. So, for instance, for 72,000, this one right here, this is the biggest one I saw. But if we go and look at it and what it is like a retirement community home is what it is. You can see, community elder care services is kind of the name of the business here. It's on a 6-acre lot, and the building itself, though, has a value, and the building value is like $5 million. And so, in fact, they are not. What's interesting is that the building value. Oh yeah, there's the land value. Okay, so give the land value here, value of 60,000. That's kind of weird though. The assessed value there for the land being 784 versus a true land value of 60,000. Something weird about that. But in any case, the $5 million property with an opening bid of 72,000 for the lien, and you can kind of get a sense. I mean, it's a pretty big facility there, and something that looks like it was also probably made fairly new.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's just because it has the assessed value and their appraised value there. That's the difference between those. But obviously, being a $72,000 lien against a county property that has a value of $5.3 million, your $75,000 is protected against all of that real estate. So either scenario, you're going to be able to make your money back or get your interest rate return in most cases. And if not, you're going to be able to acquire the property.
Yeah, I mean, in every case, your money is just so well secured. I mean, even this one, it's an $8,000 opening bid, which seems like it's high, but then you go and you look at it and you see that, it's actually, whatever it is here, it's a $500,000 building, that they have, that's set up there. So the property is pretty well secure in terms of the lien is highly secure. And the same is true with the small ones. It's very interesting in that way. And, Mississippi pays a high enough interest rate return, that it's a good investment, to pick these things up. Even the ones that don't have that much, that don't cost much, $200, we have properties that are still highly secure, $20,000 in value. And it's not something that we've seen just once. I mean, it's pretty well every time we look at these. I'm sure there's junk property in here. I've seen a few pieces that are kind of junk. I mean, $3. Let's see what the $3 one is. That's got to be it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's the $3 one is junk. At some point, it gets cheap enough where you're just looking at junk properties. But from between there, we saw some that were $100 and were still good, valuable pieces of property, not just junk land. So it's going to be $100. You could still have good pieces of property, maybe if it's down in the single digits.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great piece of land. It's probably valued around 15 grand, I bet, as far as the market value. You can see that
Mm.
the total value is around 10. So I would bet that it would be about 10 to 20 grand, depending on the market value for a $135 lien. So your $135 is protected against a property that's valued anywhere between 10 to 20 grand. Looks like it's a good sized lot, so it's buildable. So this is the type of opportunity in a state like Mississippi to earn a great interest rate return while at the same time acquiring property,
Yeah,
or the
yeah, and
possibility of acquiring property, I guess I should say.
yeah, there's so many interesting properties. And what's also kind of interesting is the way that they have them listed. We can always see if if it is related properties. If we if one property is has a high chance of being next to or somehow related to the property. But like we see here, we J&N Timber Company, J&N Timber. We've got a couple of those there, so it can give us some clear indication, that they're from the same owner. We really don't know until we get in there and look at at what the property is in terms of its mapping, see what it is, see where they place the value on it to see how secure it is. And I don't think we've seen very many cases here where the property isn't where the lien doesn't represent 1% of the property's value or less, and that's just highly secure. In that case, it's always going to make sense to want to foreclose on the properties. Your money's highly secure. And if you make that 18% rate of return, that's a great rate of return too that you can't earn in just any lien state.
Yeah, well, and as far as the research is concerned, we're not going to have to put the same type of research we would in a tax deed proper or anything like that. In fact, we'd probably take kind of a approach where we're going to bid on as many tax liens as we can get, because there's going to be a number of them that are going to be worth bidding on. I would say, just by looking at what I've seen, that probably 70 to 80% of these, if not higher, are tax liens that if you won would probably be a good, safe investment as far as what type of property it's connected to.
Yeah, I'd say it's even higher. At least from what
Yeah,
we've seen, it's a really high percentage of these properties. Even one here that has a $6,000 amount, it's one of the higher ones, on the list. But it's against a property, that is valued at nearly $500,000. And it's a single-family home as well that we can see. They've got the address. No, actually, no, the owner there would live in Louisiana. Yeah, we can see all this property here, and it's clearly another house. And the same thing would be true. Let's look at. What's kind of crazy is just how often these are always good investments with numbers that work. A lot of these are acreage. I've been amazed at how much acreage is in this particular sale. This one doesn't say how many acres that is here offhand, but obviously that could be 30, 50 acres of property there, starting at $1,000, and you can see that they say the true value there is 69,000. Steve's probably right. That's probably half of what the real value is, or maybe even less. And so again, very secure investment. And if you're into land, there are a lot of these liens are placed against large plots of land.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and as far as acquiring the property, we're going to have a better chance of actually acquiring a piece of land than we would a single family home. So when you can buy tax liens, I've seen tax liens as little as $50, on this list that look like they're great tax lien certificates that would be worth bidding on good, solid property. And so if we're looking at earning a good interest rate return, if we're looking at being able to buy a number of different tax liens, looking at these different states are giving us an opportunity that we didn't have, even last year or the year before, as more of these areas are moving their auctions online.
Yeah, and there are just keep in mind too how many liens there are here. I mean, we're talking about we're talking about 20 pages of properties, and there's got to be at least 50 a page. I mean, it's a crazy number. I mean, it's like 800 to 1,000 properties or liens, that are available here, for all different amounts here. And yeah, it is one of the weird cases where normally if you get a lot of inexpensive liens, liens that are for uh, under $200, under $100, they're going to be junk. But these liens, we haven't seen any of these that have been junk. All of them have been sitting at really low amounts. $300 lien for $25,000 property. That's probably the worst numbers we've seen yet, and that's just barely over 1%. Most of these are going to be well under 1% on the properties. I think you might be muted. There's more acreage.
Yeah, there's a number of different counties as well. We're just looking at one of the counties that are having auctions taking place. So Shade, go ahead and go back up to the top real quick. And click on, one of the next counties down or one of these other counties. And I think this one here had 23 pages of properties. And so there are all of these different auctions that are taking place. We were just kind of looking at the first county on the list.
Cow, look at that. That's crazy.
And some counties may have a little bit better real estate or markets a little bit better, but maybe, in that county has a little bit more competition than another county that may be a little bit rural, but still has good property on it, which may have a little bit less competition. So maybe we can get closer to 18% on this auction, where another auction maybe has a little bit more competition, where it bids down to 15 cents or 15%.
Yeah, well, what's crazy is that there are multiple sales kind of all happening here at the same time in Mississippi for their liens, and there are hundreds of liens in each one of these sales. Certainly there's not going to be enough money to to spread or to cover all of these very well. So it's not as if I think the interest rate's going to get bid down much, and you can basically get your pick of the list. I think there's so many properties that I think people will be able to pick out what they like and not deal with too much competition in trying to buy these liens that should pay out pretty good rates of return, and certainly are so well secured that if you could foreclose on any of these properties, it would be a home run.
Yeah, well, and it seems like most of the counties have about the same size. In fact, that District 2 actually has 42 pages.
That is insane. These are all on the same day, all happening on the 7th.
The 6th, I believe. Let me check, because I think they all happen on the first Tuesday. That Mississippi kind of has time in April and a time in August, where they go ahead and auction off on one of those two dates.
Yeah, this one is more downtown area here, or at least it looks like more city. That was a commercial property, but holy cow, I can't believe how many properties are here and the varying amounts. Yeah, 42 pages. That's pretty crazy.
The smallest was that District 1 that had 12 pages, but this other one I looked at has 22. So there's a ton of different auctions that are taking place in Mississippi. So if you're interested in tax liens, now's the time, because there's plenty of auctions taking place within the Mississippi sale.
Yeah, a lot of them, thousands and thousands of properties to look through and to view, and you can get liens against all of them for very low percentages of value. So yeah, what an awesome opportunity there for lien investors. And these are about as safe investments as you can find too, because in every one of these cases, your money is secured by property value that is pretty well 99% higher than what you paid. The property has a very high chance of just redeeming, but if it didn't, I mean, you're talking about amazing returns on your money.